Hello, and welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice. And this month, Tahitsu has chosen what I'm going to call Building Twitch for Better Build Discussions, something Twitch was certainly not built for. Please keep in mind throughout this Parley, before we start, we are kind of trying to do something different with Twitch than it was normally intended for. I, in general, am trying to do something that is not the normal way these platforms are used. So, for one, yeah, obviously this is going to take some work. We don't know for sure that these platforms will work beautifully for these things. On the other hand, I hope nobody would bounce off of or reject these ideas just because they're not what people normally do. I think I can easily demonstrate that there are many merits to using YouTube, Twitch, Patreon, etc. this way. I think that these are also good things these platforms can do. The fact that they weren't intended to be that way, well, what is intended? They weren't intended to be what they currently are. Exactly. They just kind of became that. It wasn't so far from the intention, but anyway, I hope you will not swing too far in either direction and keep an open mind about what Twitch is and isn't good at. We don't exactly know, but we have some ideas. There are things it is built for that we can't change, but also to keep an open mind that it's not as if people are trying very hard to find all the things Twitch can be good at. These platforms in general. That's not true. This is a pretty immature profession that people haven't experimented much with in general. It's quite punishing to experiment in a lot of these professions. So just keep in mind, just because we're doing something that might seem unfamiliar, something being less common or popular is not a negative or positive statement in and of itself. We need to break down why the approaches that are popular, and why maybe it doesn't seem like people are doing the thing I'm trying to do on Twitch. And second of all, please keep in mind that this is my job. That means, one, that, the thing I'm doing with Twitch, this is my business model. Like, it'll sink or swim, but we're not gonna, turn it around. I'm not going to stop trying to do this kind of thing broadly. I don't think there's any good reason to stop, but if you think there is, just know that's really not up for discussion at the moment. This is my job, this is what I'm trying to do. I would say it's already been successful enough that it would be pretty stupid to stop doing it anyway. There are definitely some improvements to be made that we'll talk about here. But the other thing that I'm saying when I say this is my job is that you need to keep in mind that some of these things, especially a lot of the advice that Tahitsu and I would have for us communicating on Twitch, a lot of it is, in some ways, the worst kind of advice. It's very obviously a good idea, but it takes time and resources I simply don't have right now. So there's no need to discuss whether we should do it. We unarguably should, but I just can't. And that's not because I literally could not possibly move mountains and make it happen. It's because you need to keep in mind this is only part of the thing I do for a living. And I'm not currently in a place where the Zany Pants YouTube channels, for example, the kind of artery by which blood pumps into the system, those videos are not up and running. I will be coming back to that throughout this parlay. It answers quite a few of these problems. Twitch is not meant to do its job alone, although we do need to think about that. So just keep in mind that any decisions, any actual action we take about this subject, that's going to be filtered through not just whether it's a good idea, but also through my time and resources and other things that I need to prioritize in different ways. So it's not as simple from a perspective that you don't have. I will try to give you during this parlay. Okay? So Tahitsu says, to start, this is going to be a parlay more about thinking about that, how to frame having discussions on Twitch. What are the challenges? Thinking about them itself may be somewhat of a solution. I agree, Tahitsu, just to start that way. Tahitsu says, I've always been fascinated by the results of various studies that show spending an hour planning or reflecting on a subject dramatically improves the performance of students for much longer periods of time, up to years. I noticed this to be true in my personal experience as well. Any amount of thinking spent on a problem, even a few minutes, gives a disproportionately large benefit compared to not thinking about it, even if you haven't solved the problem. And that's kind of what we're going to do today with discussing on Twitch. So the way this is laid out is that Tahitsu has some observations about Twitch, facts pretty much about Twitch that they want to highlight, and then some addresses, some comments on those things. I will read the parameters, the observations, and then when Tahitsu gets into addressing those observations and commenting on them, I will then comment too as we go. And then there'll be some sort of things we could do about it at the end. Okay? Observations. 1. Twitch chat has a low character limit, certainly relative to what it could be. In theory, Tahitsu says this is good because it encourages people to think about what they write and be succinct. However, in reality, it rarely works out this way. That's pretty subjective. In fact, low character limit can sometimes bring out the worst from people. I definitely feel it myself. I'd like to hear more about that. That could mean quite a few things. Thing number 2, there are multiple conversation types, all crammed into a single chat. People who goof around. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. People in chat talking to each other irrespective of Zandypants matters. For example, life issues or something. I think these are surprisingly often on brand, but I do agree that's a distinct type of discussion. People having intelligent conversation about a topic. Okay. People advising specific things for a specific game, such as which boon to pick in Hades, or which helmet ability to go with this week's Warframe we're working on, etc. Tahitsu says there are more, but this core set is enough to demonstrate my point. Totally. Number 3, there are newcomers and people unaware of context at all times. I'm just going to interject a quick factual explanation here. I frequently cite the statistic that, on average, my streams have, again, if you averaged it out, a new person entering chat once every minute. I know that seems crazy. The view count on my streams isn't really high, but the number of unique viewers is surprisingly high. Over the course of the 2 or 3 hour show, there are usually around 120 to 180 unique viewers, which means that if you average them out, every minute, someone has no idea what the conversation is about. A new person enters who is utterly baffled by what we're discussing. It doesn't quite work out like that. That's just a simplification to make a point. But when Tahitsu says there are newcomers and people unaware of context at all times, part of what is meant here is that. I have more to say about this point though. Number 4, Zandy has to manage all of that in real time, when in reality, a lot of this information serves as noise. Right, there are many things in chat that, strictly speaking, I don't need to or even shouldn't address. And number 5, the previous point is slightly alleviated by the fact that it takes more time to write in chat than to speak. I'm a fast typist, but even for me, it's much faster than to just speak. Which on one hand gives an advantage to Zandy, but on the other hand, it makes it difficult to have intelligent conversations due to the delay. I do have my stream delay set as low as possible, but even with almost real-time interaction, chat being backed up does mean we have to put it in a positive way, we have to have discussions at a relaxed pace. That would be the positive spin on what we have to do. Okay, so now addressing the observations. So you'll remember that the first one was Twitch chat having a low character limit. Tahitsu says, how would you facilitate the strong suit of character limitation, namely concise and thought out responses? I think, Tahitsu thinks, announcing themes for streams in advance, like we do with Framework, is a good step in this direction because it allows people to prepare in advance rather than doing it on the spot. So again, some of these are actionable things. Yeah, so I kind of do this. You know, one thing I've mentioned a lot over the course of my career so far, and it will become even more true, is that this is why it's important for videos going forward, for example, to be pretty clearly focused on making builds. We don't want audience members that just like Warframe, because they do not want the thing that we are trying to discuss when I do a stream. It might seem fine, but the reason it isn't is because it causes more noise or disappointed people who are not getting the thing that they think they're going to get. Me communicating more clearly in everything I do, mostly YouTube videos in my opinion, that I am here to discuss builds, basically a set of decisions to achieve an intended goal. Me communicating that more clearly makes all of this work better in a way that is hard to see, but I can tell you as the only professional available, it does work. That is what makes that happen. It's only as good as it is, and I think we are in a pretty good place. We are discussing in this video marginal improvements to Twitch. It's not amazing or perfect, but it's really good. You know, if you look at other Twitch communities, they are extremely far behind in this category. They're not trying to be good at this. We have made something much, much better than the average streams community already. It could just be much better still, right? So And the reason for that is because I have focused to some degree. We already are streaming in ways where many titles of my streams say, like, we're talking about builds and people kind of know what that is in the title, or even the specific character or unit or item or whatever that we are going to make builds about, or like the type of making builds that we're going to talk about. That's already usually in the title of my streams. About telling people what the theme will be, or some such, like the title, I guess, of the stream in advance, I'd like to note that I did that quite extensively for a while, and people do not prepare in advance. It's important to remember that we're getting people during their leisure time. This changes what we can do to influence people to act in certain ways. You can still create an environment that rewards certain behavior. I'm not trying to treat you all like infants. I'm just saying you can structure an environment that makes it comfortable and effective to put out certain parts of yourself, right? But those parts are different because we're getting people in their leisure time. I personally believe that trying to get people to prepare ahead of time is one of the things that we really can't do. There will always be people who kind of do that. I'll also tell you briefly, tahitsu, that I've privately actually got a lot of inconvenience from people who do this, but don't bring it to the stream. I've had people often just send me tons of stuff that I can't possibly respond to, and I usually tell them as much. And much of the time, this is done in a way where I don't mean to be rude to these people, but you should think about how many people watch these things. If everyone did that, surely you understand that not only would I not be able to respond to any of it, I wouldn't even be able to use Discord, for example, because I would have an endless waterfall of messages. You need to have some awareness of how many people are participating in this discussion. I think most people do a really good job of this, but I will say that that's been a fairly significant issue for me over the years. People preparing in advance often goes awry, I'll say. Parley is a pretty good place for someone who has kind of their own agenda for something to say, like, I just want you to talk about this for 30 minutes. That's perfectly fine. I hope you can understand why I want people to pay me $9 if that's what you want me to do. I got to make a living here. So for what it's worth, I think that one solution to the whole streaming thing is that I have other things I provide among my YouTube channels and my stream and stuff. I have other things I provide that may be a better fit for some people, and increasing cross-pollination between those things will help people get the thing they want from me through the place I offer that makes the most sense for me to give them that thing. And because I haven't actually done all those things, I have Parley, I have the stream, but other types of videos, that's not perfect at the moment. That's partially my fault. That's just where I am. Okay, response number 2. So you'll recall this is in reference to the multiple different types of conversations crammed into a single chat. tahitsu says, I think the nature of this observation is technological. In essence, we're stuck with it because that's what Twitch decided to do on their platform. And tahitsu says, we have not build-crafted the stream experience for our specific needs. I'd just like to note that, not to be defensive, but I absolutely have build-crafted the stream experience to my specific needs, just not as much as is possible, for sure. There's more you could do, but it's not as if I haven't done it at all. tahitsu says, in other words, Twitch has a very broad build for itself, and we have not done anything. I absolutely have done some things. Again, tahitsu, I know you mean no offense here. I just want to point out that I have done some stuff about that. Again, first of all, just running a community, running a career on the internet where I make entertainment that even has a stated purpose, like to discuss builds, just that is already a gigantic step up from what most people do if you want cohesive discussion, because it unites all people in the channel around there is a topic that we could share mutually. Warframe, Genshin Impact, Hades are not, in my opinion, specific topics in that way. There are way too many reasons you could be coming to those things. But understanding our relationship to Buildcraft is, in my opinion, a sufficiently specific topic that there is, at least in theory, a reason why you are here. There are people who are in my community for in some appreciable way, effective and ineffective reasons. And I think that that's a pretty big step up from not doing that. So it's important to remember that most communities, almost all communities on Twitch, do not have any appreciable thing that they rally around. And again, I'm claiming that a game or like the streamer usually isn't sufficiently specific to make a coherent community that is relatively united to perform a single function or achieve a shared goal, right? Almost all Twitch communities might have some things in common, but they are not really working in concert. They're not really on the same page in the same way. This isn't necessary to have a successful career on Twitch, but I believe it is necessary to have a good discussion in a forum that is 100% public. Like if people can just drop in, there needs to be a sufficient mass of people that are talking about, invested in the same specific enough topic, right? This creates an environment I've seen many times over the years where new people come into chat that don't know what's going on. But because there's enough of a majority to create a tone for what this community is like, bad actors, would-be bad actors, don't do things they would do that would inconvenience us because the social pressure is sufficient to communicate what we are doing here. So I'd just like to point out that that subtle but very important thing is something we've already done. And that is by far the most valuable thing about the Twitch community we have together. Now, this is going to be the part where we get into things that I agree we should do, but I just kind of can't do at the moment. Tahitsu says, therefore, I think the improvements we can make here are all technological in nature, such as adding chatbots, using separate services, etc., and they'll include some sort of separation of topics. This is a huge topic in general. I already have a few things that have been a goal for a while that, again, it will just take a lot of resources. One of them goes back to that bit about how different types of discussion in chat could be categorized relatively easily. In college, I studied a little bit of what's called digital humanities, which is categorizing strings, text, with code, basically applying mathematics and programming to sorting prose in literature traditionally, but you can use it for lots of things. This would be things like automatically composing poetry, for example. But where I'm interested in using it is being able to categorize types of messages such that a relatively simple but far beyond my capabilities bot could read chat with me and pull out the types of messages as it learned over time what those types were that are things that it actually helps for me to respond to. This would significantly edit down chat when I needed that. I could have chat and then the bot's, digital humanities version of chat. So if it was very busy, I could read like an only the highest priority things list. Additionally, that list could involve the bot sending you a message on Twitch that simply said, the question you just asked, which I, the bot, know is a question, has been recorded, and I sent it to Zandy. It's in queue, and I'll send you a quick message when he answers the one before it, so you know to keep an eye out and ear out for your answer. And then the bot could just send you a little ping back saying, hey, he's about to answer your question, as I keep going. All I'd have to do is click each of the messages as I finished responding to them. So functionally speaking, the bot could be quite simple except for the part about teaching it to recognize certain types of messages, but I am literally not an expert in anything except how to get the bot to learn to recognize different kinds of messages. That is what I studied for a career I did not take and instead did this. So I'm quite confident that that technology is not, if that sounds challenging to make to you, it really isn't. Like there's already stuff like that being used in other specialized fields. That is very achievable in theory. It would just take a lot of money because I need to pay someone to make it, and a good amount of time because I also need to help make it such that it will recognize the types of messages that I'm trying to get it to recognize. This is a little harder than it sounds because my community isn't like other Twitch communities. You need the data from my community specifically and my input to make a bot that does that thing for our community because it isn't sufficiently similar to other communities from a kind of linguistics perspective. I could get more into why I think that's true. I can't prove that's true, but I believe that's true. And for once, I am actually qualified to talk about this. So I'm quite confident that will work in the future. But I hope you can see how, like, I don't think anybody would disagree that that's not a bad idea. The point is it's irrelevant, right? Like, it's resources and time, not debating the utility of the thing that is up for grabs. Now, just to be clear, you'd be able to just type no and opt out of this bot messaging you. It's not going to spam you a bunch of times in chat if you don't want it to. It would just be something there for people to immediately feel when they entered the stream, like, oh, this is a community that is doing something different. This stream works differently than other streams. The worst thing, the weakest link of creating a sort of a social environment on a stream is that people tend not to register that it actually is something truly different than what they're used to, because there isn't any technical, specific kind of outward detail that puts like a label on the stream that says this is a different entire type of stream, right? They feel it and it affects people, like the social atmosphere of the stream. That affects people. But I believe an additional step is needed to make it feel intuitively, technologically different in some more tangible way. And I think that a bot like this would definitely do that. That's true. I think it needs to be pretty light. Again, it will take some testing. It will need to be very custom to me. Even if somebody else has made something similar, I doubt it will work for the purposes we have in mind. That's going to take some work. I do feel like that will work very well if it's something that I get time to make. Now, other platforms. So you said like separate services, etc. I don't have a lot to say about this topic. You should just know that it is way more difficult than people think to get people to just click something, anything in visual media. If you're watching a YouTube video of mine or a Twitch video, if I can get you to click one thing, you are in like the 1% of that stream. There are links that I've posted in dozens of videos that were broken for years and nobody ever mentioned it, or like I had a hit counter and literally not a single person clicked it for tens of thousands of hours. I know it was working because I clicked it a few times, but it had like 3 hits maybe, tens of thousands of hours, tens of thousands of views, excuse me. So I just want you to keep in mind that anything that makes the system itself more complicated on the user's end is basically automatically out. I'm not saying I'm not interested in it, but you need to understand just how much of a cost that has. Almost everyone in the world will simply never use such a thing. It doesn't matter how effective it would be. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how interested they are in the community I have. They just won't use it for the most part. Now, it's also important for me to insert that if I could get you to click one thing in the description of one of my videos, from a business perspective, I want that to be my Patreon account, not anything else, basically. And when people are paying a little bit every month for Patreon and participating in discussions through Parley, that's a much better indirect way to encourage them to communicate in a certain way. It's not as effective to do it as something where you need to have kind of qualified to participate in the discussion on Twitch. So it is important to leave some potential excellence of discussion on Twitch on the table in the name of people actually using the system that's there, and me not discouraging people to click on the thing that is the only way I make money to make a living, to make this my job. So something that's like a separate service that they use elsewhere, I think is kind of out for that reason. And another final quick note is that you should consider how, again, Twitch doesn't need to do all the work. A lot of people trying to have a certain kind of discussion on Twitch, like Twitch just is the wrong forum for that, even if it was perfectly sculpted to our needs. It would just be better to use a different environment that I already provide for that thing. For example, using a forum in conjunction with Twitch to frame discussion before the Twitch stream starts begs the question, why not just use the forum to have that discussion? That's an oversimplified example of what I mean. Again, we do have a Discord. I do have 3 YouTube channels. You know, it doesn't have to be on Twitch. I should maybe do a better job of thinking about exactly what specific things should be discussed on Twitch, not just which things could be discussed on Twitch, which is maybe more what I'm doing at the moment. But overall, my response to this is we definitely have buildcrafted the stream. I've put a lot of work into subtly influencing the stream toward our needs. There is definitely more things you could do, but making it more complicated, particularly asking the viewer to do much at all, is just not going to work. It's not like I've never tried that either, in my opinion. I don't know for sure. I'm not trying to reject all suggestions. By the way, I would be interested to hear like what specifically you have in mind. Just because I'm pretty confident it won't work, let it never be said that I'm not willing to change my mind, right? Like, I'm still very interested to hear. I hope that's clear. But I am pretty confident that that's not an especially useful line of reasoning. Again, I think the most useful thing about this parlay so far is just including most other people in the audience in the thought process that Tahitsu and I are currently undergoing. Number 3. So remember, the note for this was that there are newcomers and people unaware of context at all times. And Tahitsu says, you could create a series of introductory material for newcomers. That's a suggested improvement, although it opens a whole new can of worms that might as well be its own parlay. So perhaps this should be the last point to discuss. I don't think it should. Again, I feel like I kind of addressed it before. It simply won't be used. Like, people just won't use it. I do want to note that there is a little bit of this. Twitch, and especially Discord, has gotten better at this. Allow you to put rules that the chat must accept before they move on. Now, for Discord, it's currently a bit too new, I think, for me to say for sure. But I would say that they do a fairly good job making you engage in some way such that you probably comprehend something about the body of rules that was posted. On Twitch, it's a platform where you're too used to you just click yes on everything, you know? And I'm sure most people don't read these things. That itself is a pretty good example of why I think people just wouldn't use such materials. Now, that being said, Tahitsu, I do think that there are some big exceptions to this point. First of all, I think that a bot, like the one I described before, would do well to have like the ability to detect when something seems like a very rote wiki question. You could even have the bot literally look up on the internet things that people asked, and if it arrives at a very good answer, maybe using like the I'm feeling lucky feature, it could just send the user that answer on the internet. It's very common for people in chat to type things that I often think, like, if you just type this into Google, you would be done. You'd have your answer. Why are you here? You know? And sometimes it's because they want an icebreaker. You know, the bot would say, here's the answer. But if you were trying to kind of open discussion, say so. Zandy would love that, the bot would say, something like that. That's perfectly fine. A lot of people ask seemingly factual questions, seemingly transactional questions, because they don't know how to start talking, but they wish to. And that's perfectly fine. People are gonna do that. I don't think that's a particularly ineffective social tactic. And we need to have a way to call to that. At the same time, it would definitely cut down on some bloat in chat to just have the bot quickly get out of the way anyone who wanted a simple answer. And I do think that's a way that the bot could be effective. Again, you can see how it's pretty unarguable that that would be good if I had it. The problem is I don't have it. Not that it would or wouldn't be good. It clearly would be good. I think some version of that would be helpful. So that's a way that not really introductory material, but some additional materials could be nice. From time to time, there is a common question like, I recall Twitch drops, where a lot of people don't know how Twitch drops work. That was more true in the past. Tahitsu, I don't believe you were with us when this happened, but my Twitch channel originally got a lot of traction because of the Twitch drops campaign for Plains of Eidolon in Warframe. This was a pretty interesting time for making builds. There was a lot of new things in Warframe, and open worlds, which are a new environment for using builds in with their own parameters. I still feel like I haven't covered open world building in Warframe quite as much as I'd wish to, but anyway, I streamed a lot, and it was also one of the very early Twitch drop events. Twitch drops was a relatively new system that people didn't understand, and chat was almost inundated with people spamming just drops related questions or the word drops, thinking that like got them items or something. And so of course I made a quick video and a bot command that let me quickly post something in chat explaining that. And it got a few hundred views over the course of my Twitch channel getting 100,000 views over a few months. So that gives you an idea of just how few people would ever read such a thing. Like nobody will look at any of this. Like that's the reason it's not a good idea. Not because in theory it would be bad. Personally, and I'm sure this doesn't evade your notice, tahitsu, I think the most effective way to discuss this type of topic is for someone to make a parlay about it. And then the people in the community that will listen will watch the parlay and think, huh, yeah, like I could communicate this way and that might be more or less effective, right? The very fact that this has been about 30 minutes has lost about 50% of its potential viewers. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure. You can't make everyone happy. The fourth thing, tahitsu says Zandy has to manage all of this in real time, when in reality, a lot of this information serves as noise. And as a comment, tahitsu says, you're clearly against moderators, but how do you plan to manage content as your audience grows? I've got nothing here. I think you're overestimating how much of a problem this is. Again, a lot of bad acting on Twitch is headed off by having a sufficiently large social contract working in the background. Many people who would otherwise have misbehaved don't, because the community has such a clear identity. And this might seem unrealistic or like a coincidence, because almost no other communities can avoid this problem. But that's because they haven't tried. They don't have anything like this. I can tell you from my experience in larger events like those Twitch Drops campaigns that I've never ever had monitors. I have two monitors, in fact, moderators. During those times when thousands of people who knew way less about me, when I had a much less effective social environment, when thousands of people in that situation were watching, I was still able to moderate all of chat with very little trouble by myself. And I've grown a lot as a creator since then. We will never get more than that many viewers. So I'm quite confident that I will be able to moderate everything myself with the help of bots forever. I don't think that is ever going to be a concern. I'll quickly note that on Discord, we do actually have a bot that allows chat to democracy style temporarily kind of time out someone, where then I get a summary of the conversation and I can decide manually what to do about those things. This is, I think, a very good system. I think a person that is bothered by being timed out for a day or two is too impatient for our community anyway. The system is very easy to punish if it's misused. To date, it has never been misused. It hasn't been used much because it isn't needed much. But if I'm away from my Discord channel, it allows chat to stop a spammer or somebody who's really acting up, and then I can be heavily aided in dealing with those things manually. I can be everywhere at once without even being present. So I do want to note that I have done some work in that space already. Shout out to my friend Steven, who made that bot and might make the bot we've been referring to for a lot of this time. I am quite confident that moderators are simply not necessary for the approach that I'm taking. There's a lot invisibly happening to cut down on the amount of bad acting. If you don't think this is true, ask a creator with a similar sized audience to me, or even a smaller one like Joey and I have talked, about how relatively more often moderation action is needed by the moderators those people have. Even though their channel is the same size or smaller than mine, there are many, many, many moments on these streams where people would have done something nasty and don't, in an invisible moment where the social contract is pushing that back. So have a bit of faith in this. It's one of the greatest successes of this model. When I started doing this for a living years ago, I wondered whether this would work, and I'm pleased to say it clearly does. It definitely does work. It's human nature. And finally, tahitsu's final observation and then the address. The previous point about me managing all this stuff is alleviated by the fact that it takes more time to write in chat than to speak, which on the one hand gives an advantage to me, but on the other hand, it makes it difficult to have intelligent conversations due to the delay. tahitsu says this point is both addressed by technological means, some text-to-speech converter, although we're not there yet, and by setting a theme or a topic. Clearly, it's also addressed by having a voice chat, but that creates way more problems than it solves. It does. There's a lot of risk in Parley, as well as on Twitch, that I'm giving you the ability to make anything you want be associated with me. You know, in Parley, I could just say I won't do a parlay about that. Like, of course, I can refuse. But there is an element where, for example, when Free William recently, a month and a half ago or so, did a parlay where I had to click a link and then respond to whatever came up. That was okay because the moment I see what's in the link, I could choose to just not publish the video. But when I stream on Twitch and I've built up an audience, you can go into chat and use basically all of my power to say whatever you want. And you might be thinking, but if people just say something stupid, then what's the problem? Well, people don't remember some, random nerd on the internet. They remember it as being something that happened on that pants logo stream. Even though it wasn't me, functionally, there is very little difference from if it was me who said that. In the memory of the person, if they have a bad experience, it was me for all intents and purposes. And I have no choice but to give some degree of that power. Personally, I believe this is why it's a lot more effective to head things off at the pass, make a community where people don't want to act nasty, rather than moderating them when they do. Like, I feel like that is broadly a pretty effective approach for a platform where you can't really control what comes out of people's mouths. A lot of larger channels, which obviously don't do this, hardly anyone does this thing I'm describing. A lot of larger channels, because they don't do that thing, they instead need to moderate, hold back every single message before it goes live, and have moderators read every single message that ever goes on the channel, because if somebody speaks out in a weird way, the creator isn't as focused or prepared to deal with the implications of the chat being co-opted by someone who said this nasty thing or whatever. I am prepared for those things. And simply not having a large community is also a solution. By focusing income, not to be cold, on quality over quantity, focusing on getting less of you, something you want more, basically, we can have a community that is easier to manage for the person who has the management idea, rather than needing to find people, moderators, who are close to understanding my management ideal, but of course can never possibly have the exact idea I have. So personally, I feel like it's worth noting that voice chat really upends a lot of that. It's quite difficult to manage. You could yell some profanity and my channel would immediately get destroyed, and there's nothing I can do about that. It will really never make sense to allow much of anybody onto voice chat. Nor do I think most viewers want that. Maybe they might want to participate, but I think a lot of people are there for me. I often get comments on, I like this information delivered by your voice, something about the quality of my voice. So yeah, we're certainly not doing that. I have some questions about this point though. You said, on the other hand, it makes it difficult to have an intelligent conversation due to the delay. The delay is minimized. I obviously the delay really here is you type a thing, I see it immediately, I respond to it immediately, but then you have to type another thing, and there are little delays in there. Like boarding a plane, the slowdown is a bunch of little spaces between the interactions, not necessarily that typing or certainly not speaking are so slow, or that the delay on the stream is slow. It's not those things, it's the time in between that stuff. I do think that having a more organized stream would help. I agree. Tahitsu, something I was going to spend a lot more time on this parlay discussing is the idea that there are certain categories of topic that are better for a stream. I, for a while, did these kind of like many medium-sized topics streams, and that doesn't really work for reasons that we don't have time for here. I have learned that having it be more focused or decidedly more broad, we're going to handle things as they go, is really good. And I do think that it keeps the cadence of conversation going to have me use some discretion in how long I discuss a topic. Something I'm trying to get a lot better at over the next few months. That's one of the things I use Archive Parley, the kind of break mini version of this that's free on Twitch streams. I use that partially to teach myself to answer questions at a deliberate rate. To look at a question and say, okay, what are some good ways I can answer this? And which one is the length that is appropriate for now? And that's hard. Like, that is challenging to do. Note that I usually have to do it with no further time to contemplate. I just have to look at the thing and think, I've got 1 second to decide which of these 3 ways, which length, that one, go. And that is hard. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm not very good at it. But that skill does create a big benefit for the flow of conversation because it allows people to, within reason, follow along at a better cadence. I think a lot of the time, the medium specificity conversations where there's like a lot of medium-sized topics, those streams worked badly because of the way I answer those questions as much as because of things about Twitch. So I do think there's things about me gaining strength as a communicator that will make that work better. I said a lot already about different, like the theme and the topic things. Like I already talked about that a bit. I don't want there to be too much or too little of a theme as per se. I do think it's good to have room to be playing the game rather than always building a specific thing. And that balance is tricky. But the thing I haven't added is this detail about me communicating, me growing in strength as a communicator will make it easier to manage this quality, will make it easier for me to cater to you and your communication speed. Again, obviously that bot I mentioned will also help me keep pace. A feature you could give the bot would be to gently reorder things in the queue for me to answer based on how relatively long it's been since they were asked to make extremes disappear. People getting their answer literally immediately is usually unnecessary because they won't respond right away anyway. And one person waiting an outlandishly long time is also unnecessary for that very reason. You could just fiddle those around subtly. The bot could just average the order of the questions based on a weighted amount of how long they've waited for a response. And that would gently increase the quality of conversation too, by giving you and I the right amount of time to digest each other's responses. And I think that if that happened, if we had that, subtly, in this quiet way, we would get used to a flow. Like you'd get used to answers would come in a somewhat expected 1 to 2 minute interval more consistently, rather than a much less known amount of time. People sometimes get it right away, or I've seen people, and it's very flattering, wait as long as 30 minutes for me to say a thing. If you're just watching, I know a lot of you think that's no big deal, but it would obviously be better if there was a more reliable amount of time and a notification in your Twitch chat that told you when you were going to get your response in general. So for what it's worth, I do think that one tool and my communication skill solves almost all of the things that we've discussed. And most of the other things are addressed by me continuing to make more videos on my other channels, which helps frame discussion and the community further. I think that's all I have to say. Let me just skim the rest of it. But Tahitsu, you put a lot of work into this. And one thing you requested that I do is put a link to this document that I'm reading in the description of the Parley. You asked me to do that. You also wrote, if you fear like this might become a scam later, for example, you might get hacked, or you're taking a leap of faith, so I promise not to alter this document significantly, like I might change typos or whatever. I will do that. I personally feel like it's understood that since I'm telling the audience about this, if they see something unexpected there, something other than just a longer version of the Parley stuff I've read from you and your notes, then they know that wasn't me or you, and that's fine. I would be hesitant to be willing to link things sent by Parley patrons too often. I would usually prefer not to do this. Obviously, it's a few times. This is an unusual example. So I will. I'm perfectly willing to do that. I think that's a reasonable, very politely worded request. I don't see why I have to say no to that. So, right on. I think this is nicely worded. You said you often feel like you don't come across the way you want to, and I feel like this was very well written. I don't mean to meaninglessly flatter you. I really do think it was pretty effective. Again, the kind of point for the audience is to have a time to sort of get on the same page with what the problems maybe are, why they're that way, and what I maybe already have done, and you are already experiencing, but may just not know, and what I would do if I had unlimited resources to do so, which I, of course, don't. I personally feel like this is overall pretty simple, and it would be bad to overblow how problematic a lot of the stuff on Twitch is. My Twitch stream, in my opinion, is in a really good place. It could just be much better. most Twitch streams are in my opinion, a very underdeveloped place. They're not much to speak of, and they could improve monumentally for very little effort. Mine, I don't feel is that way. I don't feel like there's some obvious tool that I haven't tried. I have tried a lot of them that would meaningfully improve the community. I can think of theoretical things that would improve it, but as I've demonstrated, they're not trivial to acquire. They're things that in the long run I hope to get at some point, but we're not going to have them soon. On the other hand, again, this is all meant to be part of a system to some extent as well. I do think that you're going to be impressed by the degree to which people coming into the Twitch stream more from Zandypants videos, which are kind of stating the entire point of all of these things, the idea behind making builds in a certain way and trying to think about builds in a way that helps you have more fun with games. I think you will be pleasantly surprised by the effect that will have, in lots of obvious and non-obvious ways. Obviously, it will get more people who kind of get the thing watching the Twitch streams. A lot of people currently would enjoy this, but either don't know it's here because I haven't made enough videos for it to be sensible to advertise other platforms, or because they believe it is a more normal Twitch stream, which they correctly assume they would not enjoy, but they are not aware that it is actually offering something I think substantially different that they probably would like. I have plans in mind for how to deal with that. For example, we're currently doing 2 sort of yearly holidays for the channel. One of them is April Fool's, where I do kind of a high concept, real life build video, some IRL thing, build crafted. And for Halloween, I have a type of yearly event that I have in mind that we're going to do this year, so it'll be in about a month, that is related to this stream. This will be a type of entertainment, I hope, that will advertise the stream in a way that demonstrates what its unique merits are, that shows people that might like it but wouldn't normally think they'd like something on Twitch, that they may well like this stream because it isn't like other streams in some ways. I think that's important. I haven't really ever meaningfully done that, in my opinion, and I think that when I do, it will have a significant effect. A subtler way that I think of videos on the Zandypants YouTube channel are literally the thing that solves everything, and I just need time to make those, and I'm working on it, is that a lot of people who are more frustrated at these games, some of you might be listening to this parlay, I hope you don't take any offense when I say this, you would be best served by playing something else, maybe entirely or just in addition to the other game. And one of the most valuable things I can provide as someone talking about builds in games for a living is recommendations of games like that. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is chiefly because reviews do not at all encapsulate the meaning of build options in games. They just don't, almost can't do that. It just takes too long, usually, for a review cycle, for a normal video game reviewer to understand the full implications of build options in the game. Frequently, it's not even long enough for the reviewer to unlock those build options, let alone understand their context. And this just isn't their focus. It's a much more specific thing. I, on the other hand, my job is all about doing that one thing. And once I am doing a better job of that, once you have dozens of examples of games with gameplay and me talking about the idiosyncrasies of their build craft, once you have those examples, you will get a lot more people who have dealt with the frustration they have toward a game with other games or with ways of thinking about this stuff. Again, I'm not trying to tell any of you that you're being immature or something by not dealing with that. It's fine to be frustrated about that. It's frustrating. Like, I'm frustrated. I want more games like this. I don't want to have to deal with the rough edges of the games that weren't really what I signed up for. And this is one of the problems with games with build options. And my job is, if it's successful, to help eliminate that difficulty. So please don't, this is no skin off my back, or I don't know how that metaphor works here. You're fine. On the contrary, I'm just trying to say, I think I can help. And that is one of the things I've done the least. That will subtly improve discussion a lot. Usually, negative discussion about a game is tricky because there's often not much to say. You know, oftentimes, I can think back to many times when someone said something I thought was interesting, intelligently, maturely put, but which there is simply nothing to say about that is negative about a game. I find myself feeling like I need to say, Yeah, that is bad. You know, I don't think that the game itself should be baby thrown out with the bathwater just because of that one thing. You should either play something else or have a palate cleanser. And I should be, it's my job to recommend those things, and I'm not. So I do think that that would help in those moments. It would at least probably be more of a relief for all of you if you're frustrated about that stuff. For me to be able to say, you know, that reminds me of this game that is similar in this way you seem to like, but doesn't have this thing you dislike. And over time, I imagine it would be better than nothing for me to respond that way. Just as a simple example. But how to deal with these things is still something I'm working on. This ended up being pretty long. That's okay. Again, these are occasional types of parlay where people are trying to just help us all think more about a subject. And I do agree that the easiest thing that could still help with discussion on Twitch would be to just occasionally invite the audience to be more aware of the difficulties of that experience. I don't think you're all doing a bad job. You're all doing a really good job. The best job of pretty much any community on Twitch, as far as I'm concerned. But it doesn't mean we couldn't all do better. I think this is valuable. For what it's worth, I do feel like we should shout out Mr. Food as well, who has done a somewhat similar parlay about parasocial relationships, which feels relevant here. Like that was a few months ago. I feel like having one of these every so often isn't bad, especially because this one covers a lot of new ground. So tahitsu, I hope you think I did a pretty thorough job. Thanks for the question.